In our next session, help your team deal with stress and change and support their mental health. We have 4 experts for you who will dive into the tools and guidance to prevent individual and collective exhaustion, as well as burnout. They're going to particularly focus on the key learnings for building resilience. For this, I'd like to pass you on to Aubrey Stearn, Executive Director of Software Engineering at JPMorgan Chase.
Hi, welcome everyone to this panel. We'll be discussing change and its effects on stress levels, mental health in engineering teams. The session will be recorded, so please feel free to add any questions at any time to the chat section on your right, and there will be a Q&A at the end. emceeing the session will be me, Aubrey Stearn. I'm an interim CTO by trade. I spent half my career in ops and half my career in dev engineering, which makes me a huge advocate of DevOps. At this point in my career, I'd say that I specialize in finance and regulations. Next up, we have John Topper. John is a founder and CTO at the Scale Factory, an AWS consulting partner in London. His team solves infrastructure and DevOps problems for businesses of all shapes and sizes, including members of CTO Craft and members. Next we have Sarah Hale. Sarah is a director of engineering at Unity. Hi, Sarah. The world's leading platform for creators. She is based in Edinburgh and leads a globally distributed team of 55 engineers who are focused on delivering next generation gaming services. And Claire, hi Claire. Claire is the VP of engineering at Moo, an online design and print company based in London, where she leads a 50-strong technology and product team, which is fantastic. So thank you very much, and let's talk about change and stress. So question number 1, and I'm going to throw this out to Claire to kick off. Team members don't always speak up when they're under stress. What are some of the signs that we can look out for as leaders?
Yeah, I think when you think about stress and change, burnout comes to mind. One of the signals that default things that I tend to think about is has someone took a bit of time off? How are they managing their workload? But those aren't often the underlying causes. Quite often stress and burnout is caused by things that are outside of our control. I think one of the things that I tend to look out for is the types of questions folks are asking. And quite often people use their work as their safe space. It's something that they can control. They have quite a lot of influence over. So one sign that I try to look out for is when I see people asking for lots of specifics. Really going deep on asking for clarity and trying to reduce the amount of ambiguity in the workspace, especially when that's out of character. You can feel a bit wrong. So I try to pay attention to questions that people are asking that are a bit out of character, and controls normally the first signal I look for.
Great, really, really solid answers. John, can we go to you?
Sure. Yeah. I guess the out of character thing is probably the main kind of signal, right? It's not necessarily just around the work stuff, or at least they're asking me questions about work stuff, but also someone who normally shows up on time in meetings who starts becoming really tardy, or maybe is not as active on Slack as they were, or sort of. It's just generally not around quite so much. I think particularly right now, as we're all working remotely, the sense check that you might have in an office environment, you kind of don't get now. So where you might see somebody kind of basically looking pretty sullen and not themselves if they were in the office space, or not showing up in the office, that would be quite obvious. Whereas someone not checking in the morning, or really sort of being around or on time for meetings and stuff, tends to be something that you only really get an understanding of over a period of time. So your feedback loop ends up being a little longer, which is a little worrying. So it's I think if you've got cadences of one-to-ones and such in place, you sort of have an attempt at least to pick up on that signal. But actually, if someone's struggling to a certain point, they might not be talking about it in their one-to-ones. They might just be showing you through lack of engagement that they're having a bad time, and you need to keep an eye out for that as well.
Awesome. So digitally, we're saying it's a little bit more challenging in this climate to pick up on those signals.
Yeah, I think the feedback loop is longer. It's not as obvious if you're not in an office space looking at someone in the eyes and sort of seeing that they're really not having a good time. Then the other signals that they give off are less obvious, more subtle, and you're looking for patterns rather than specific incidents, which is why it needs a period of time, really.
Awesome. And Sarah, we talked about this offline about not having that physical feedback loop with people that I guess we've been used to most of our careers. And I think that was something that resonated with you. How do you answer this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think what both Claire and John have said really resonates with me. I think trying to do it or understand how your people are feeling when trying to do that on a little Zoom window or any other technology can be really tricky. One of the powerful questions that I use is actually asking what's on your mind, because I find that if I ask that, then I can work out from their answers whether they're being explicit or not about the stress that they're under. I find that's a really good way to sort of get an opener into, okay, is this person under a lot of stress and do I need to pay more attention? And the other thing which I like to ask myself is like, have I created a clear sense of purpose? So it's worth self-reflecting on that, because again, if you're not clear on what you're trying to achieve, then how can anybody else around you be clear on what you're trying to achieve? And I think that's really important. I think if you have a feeling of purpose, then it can help sort of reduce the sort of drive towards burnout, which I think is quite prevalent in our industry.
Something that I've definitely heard in recent conversations. So, John, let me ask you, as leaders, how do we incorporate mental health into the workspace narrative, the story, and like ultimately create a more positive and healthy and safe environment to discuss that kind of thing?
Sure. So I can tell you what we do. I guess that whether or not that is the solution is a question you probably want to ask yourselves. I'd also say that my perspective as someone who runs a consultancy is possibly a little different, because often our teams are working in other people's organizations, and so we can hold our own sort of spaces and provide our own support within our own organization. But sometimes you're walking into craziness where maybe the work that you're doing there is not as well supported as we might like to support our staff. So there's sort of tension there. Claire's looking uncomfortable. We've done some work with Moo. You guys have been fine. Don't worry about it. So the things that we do, we provide an EAP. So there's an employee assistance program which has access to counsellors and those sorts of resources. So obviously we're not expecting the people who run one-to-ones with the team to be able to sort of deal with difficult sort of mental health problems, but if something needs sort of a bit more kind of professional attention, we have a facility for people to be able to do that. We'll also support. In the event that someone uses the EAP and has a requirement for more sort of involved mental health support, then we do support that financially. So we'll pay for a run of treatment if that's necessary, according to the counsellors that are on the other end of that phone. So that feels important to me. I see a therapist weekly. I think for me as the person who owns the business, the buck really stops with me. I don't have anybody to do one-to-ones with, so my therapy relationship sort of does that, and I'm very publicly kind of open about that. I talk when I'm using Slack on the day that therapy is happening. I'll typically drop a message, I'm off to therapy, I'll be back in an hour, just to normalize it really and get people sort of talking about it. And I think that there are a number of people on the team who have picked up therapeutic relationships and got some of that sort of mental health support, excuse me, because I'm modeling it, and it's sort of safe to do that. So that for me is important to do as a leader, and particularly as a man. I think it's really important to model that it's okay to ask for help that way. So professional support, me modeling stuff. I don't ever. If someone is having a hard time, then we'll talk about them taking some time out. We ask whether that would help. Sometimes I think Claire, you mentioned that people sometimes sort of work is their safe space, and sometimes if they're having a hard time outside of work, then burying themselves in the work is a thing. We sort of support that where it's healthy, if necessary. It's really about kind of, I guess, understanding the needs of the individual and making sure that they feel like they've got the support that they need.
I think certainly from the perspective of somebody from the UK, I can say that when I spoke to US folks, it's much more normalized to say, hey, I have a therapist, I'm talking to them. It's something that I wouldn't say we hear super often in the UK. So it's really great that you're making that effort. Is that where your model started, or is that where your model begun? Like, how have you evolved into what you've got from where you began? Where did you begin?
So I guess we began. I think we began with the EAP. Actually, that was something that we added reasonably early on. The one-to-ones relationship was a thing that we added in part for pastoral stuff, but also for all the other one-to-one reasons like career development and so forth. One thing I guess I should say about the one-to-ones is that we sort of separate church and state. So if you are working under a lead in your team, your one-to-one is with somebody else. So the power dynamic is sort of disrupted there. And if you're having a bad time with your boss, you can go and complain to their peer rather than having to talk to them about it. So the EAP was the starting point. My therapy relationship started maybe sort of I guess about 3 years ago now. Actually, there was just a lot going on, both in work and out, and I was sort of I'd stopped recognizing some of my behavioral patterns. I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like me. Why am I doing that? And so I arranged to have a chat with a therapist that's now a weekly thing. And that's covered, all manner of things from my personal relationships to my work relationships to, my career aspirations and so forth. It's a very broad sort of therapeutic relationship. But the starting point was providing support, essentially.
Awesome. Claire, can I ask you the same question? How do we normalize the mental health into the workplace and make it safe to talk about that and engage with people?
I think John hit it on the head on talking about modelling the way. As leaders, it's important for us to make it normal to talk about these types of things. And I've got a few, similar to what John was saying, a few examples that we do at Moo, but they're things that I've successfully used in other roles as well. We have a mental health first aid team, which is a really cool thing to have. I'm not sure how many of them are right now. There was around 10 before sort of pre-furlough, pre-redundancy, but conscious effort for us to be training folks across the whole company at different levels of seniority and different skill sets that are there for people to reach out to. And these aren't people that are in the HR team or the people team. There are engineers that have been trained as a mental health first aider. And we asked for volunteers to join that program as well. So quite naturally, we got people that were interested and wanted to support and help. We've got a nice cross section of mental health first aiders across the company, and promote and remind folks that there's another avenue for them to speak to should they be more comfortable speaking to someone that's a little bit closer to home. We have similar schemes to like what John's. Oh, sorry. Do you want me to
I was going to say, is there somewhere that people can go to learn about qualifying in this so that they could become like a vocational mental health person at work, or really find the skills to start contributing in that area?
Yeah, there probably is, but I'm not one of the mental health first aiders, so I'm not familiar with the training program that we took folks through. But it was a structured set of training. It wasn't just some random CBT program. It was a formalised piece of training, and there's lots of people got certificates at the end of it. So there's I can share afterwards. I'll find out the training that we put folks through and share the link. Like what John was saying, we have a range of different benefits as well, where you can call upon external support and help, and reminding people that we can that you can use these things. And I think as leaders, it's really important for us to share content and point and signpost people to these things as well. Simple things like we've got a wellbeing Slack channel that you might have to join to maybe see some of the content, but you can always point people to the content that's there, or reshare the same topics and the same content in various different places. So I think it's important for us to advocate some of the existing messages that are out there already, and amplify them, and make it normal.
And do you think maybe putting that kind of thing on job specs as something that you advocate as a firm is something that might again open up that position to potentially more people that may feel more supported with that kind of system in place?
Did we lose Claire?
No. Oh, I think we may have lost Claire. Okay, that's okay.
I think I'm back
Sarah,
now.
Oh, you're back. There we go. We've recovered live.
Yeah, we've recovered live.
I don't know if
I
you
think
got
I
all
got
of that.
the question. It was about job specs. I hadn't considered that actually, of promoting that and describing that more as a a part of the role. That's a good bit of learning for me from this. I think it's something that we could include a little bit more. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. I think it just gives away a little bit more of the footprint of your firm and sort of the embodiment of your values a bit more. And I think anytime you're telegraphing that stuff in job specs, you're just broadening the sort of people that you might be able to get to apply.
Yeah, like I said, it's reminding, it's giving like little calls to action, isn't it? That's the other thing that I like to do. It could be a really simple thing, like just asking in your a team Slack channel, or whatever, in the morning. What are your favourite playlists to listen to help you relax? Something that's not straight away in with, how do you deal with mental health? Just sort of easing folks into the conversation, and before you know it, you've got folks sharing podcasts about mental health and well-being. From something that started just discussing music.
That's a really great value add, and I'm sure that there's a ton of folks listening that will probably take that away with them. Sarah, can we ask a similar question again? How do you incorporate mental health into the workspace narrative and create that sort of safe space for your folks? You obviously run, I think, a naturally distributed team, so this could be quite an interesting question for you.
Yeah, I think, I would definitely agree with everything that's been said before, but I think one of the things that attracted me to Unity, and that I'm really excited to sort of be able to say is true, is that one of the things we value is empathy and respect. So, we teach leaders and everyone how to act with empathy and respect. And recently in a company town hall, which is across the whole organization, so it is very distributed, our Director of Global Inclusion, Paul Saidi, he actually gave a helpful suggestion about how managers can sort of, help foster that environment of talking about well-being, mental health, stress, all that kind of stuff, normalizing it. And it was an interesting angle, which I haven't tried before, but I've been trying it recently. It's been really powerful. And effectively, the question is asking your individuals, direct reports, or just people, like, what does respect look like for them, and are they getting it? And I hadn't considered actually asking individuals that before. So we always sort of focus on, creating a company culture that is, has high empathy or high or fosters, good emotional intelligence and things like that. But actually asking an individual about what does their perspective look like has been really enlightening for me. So I've been doing a lot of that. And I think the other thing, just the more simple things, is sort of by just not making a big deal out of sort of going on paternity leave, for example, or having a holiday, and actually sort of encouraging people to take their holidays. And instead of it being an unusual request of, oh, you're taking paternity leave, how odd, actually just going, of course you're going to be taking paternity leave, or when are you taking paternity leave? Because I think sometimes we sort of forget that those kind of things really do have a huge impact on sort of happiness at work.
So absolutely, we're again taking something and trying to normalize it and make it okay for folks, as opposed to leaving it as a sort of outlier request.
Yeah, completely. So just trying to sort of make it the part of everyday conversation. So yeah, there's a bunch of sort of ways that you can sort of force those conversations and habits. So talking about your podcasts, or having we use a tool called Donut. So that's connecting people who wouldn't necessarily speak with each other. Like, that works really well, and that helps foster a healthy environment. But I think actually the sort of levels that you need to be doing these kind of activities, and that's why I think doing it at a broad company level and repeating those values that we want everyone to live by, teaching them what it looks like and what it doesn't look like, and helping them be better, it's been a really good way of creating that kind of environment.
I really liked your point on asking people what respect looks like for them, because we do it with people's careers, and as leaders we're always looking to figure out how folks on our teams want to progress their career and the kind of things that motivate them, and where you need to help navigate that flow of water to. And I think that's really good. One thing that I have found is quite useful is when you take those situations, that there's benefit to doing it on both a one-to-one level to get a sense of where folks are at, but then replaying that in group, because then folks feel reinforced when they hear the same thing back from co-workers, and it's almost like a strengthening numbers sort of thing, like, oh, this person also thinks the same thing.
So you're trying to get across. I fully agree with that.
Fantastic. So Sarah, I want to ask you a really specific question. What changes have you discovered to be unexpectedly stressful for your teams?
I think that's a really good question. So I think I spent a lot of time, particularly when I was a new manager, learning about how to deal with change, organizational change. How am I going to take my team from being a forming team into a high performing team and all that kind of stuff. And then it was the classic desk move problem, which I hadn't anticipated was going to cause any form of stress, discomfort, or upheaval until I casually went, okay, we're moving desks. Can you just take a look and tell me where you want to sit? Obviously, in hindsight, everybody went, I really want to sit in the corner with the window view. And also, I'm really unhappy about changing, floors anyway. Why do I have to sit over here? And why am I now doing here? There was so many different dynamics at play, which I just hadn't appreciated. I basically felt like I walked into an accidental sort of minefield, as it were, in terms of trying to make everyone feel safe and, calm. And it wasn't the end of the world. We were just sitting in a slightly different place, but everything about their job wasn't changing. So desk moves unexpectedly stressful for individuals, which I now appreciate a lot more. And it makes sense. You spend so much of your time at work. Of course, you want your environment to be just nice and welcoming. I suspect when people start going back to offices again, it will be an interesting challenge to get people comfortable with a more generic desk at the office, rather than what we've all sort of been doing is home comforts around. I have plants everywhere and things like that. I probably couldn't have this level of plants in an actual office. So I think that will be something we should, as leaders, think about before it happens, rather than what I did, which was just blindly cause chaos.
We've all been
Claire,
there.
Claire, can I ask you if you've found things that cause unexpected stress and anxiety in the workplace, things that maybe you might not have thought they would have?
Yeah, no, I do it all the time. And some of this is down to my personality, when things like job titles don't really bother me personally all that much. And I'm just like, yeah, whatever, VP of whatever, sure. Yeah, I'll do that next job. And I don't really care if my job title changes or not. And I forget that for the vast majority of people, that is not the case. And sometimes when I've not put enough care and attention into things like the job title in a specific career path, it's caused a huge explosion. I've had to take the time and effort and be more diligent and give it the attention that it so rightly deserves, because it is a really important thing for people. I think that job titles, I've been bitten by that a number of times of just being flippant and let's just call them all software engineers and that not landing very well.
So that absolutely can be a challenge, I think, when you're moving towards flatter structures, flatter leadership, flatter operating models for your team. And it's certainly something that I found as well, especially when you have overarching matrix models in the organization and you have things like end of year reporting and career progression and compensation to think about as well. Sometimes that doesn't always mesh with a flat team structure.
Yeah, it's been a particular challenge for me over the last 6, 8, 9 months, to be honest, as we've shrunk the size of our team at Moo, and the sort of structure has organically changed and adapted around it, I know I've got I might have to make some changes to job titles. Who knows? I should remember this conversation when it comes around to doing it.
One to remember. John, what sort of unexpected things have you found that cause stress at work and anxiety for folks?
I mean, changing fucking anything really has that kind of effect. In some regards, I definitely agree with Claire's assessment. I'm the same. I quite like change. I'm driven by kind of variety, and I also sort of, in spite of having essentially been involved in the hiring of pretty much everybody who works for us, that's not a consistent personality trait across the team. And some of my biggest leadership mistakes have been working with an incorrect assumption that everybody is a bit like me in some ways. So whether that's about being a generalist in terms of how we operate, or comfort with uncertainty, or whatever. So and the changes I've made with that mindset have often caused disruption and pain and suffering in some cases, and resignations in others. I think I was a bit flippant about saying changing anything causes upset. I think it does for some people, that any amount of change is a bit uncomfortable, and I think that the biggest the biggest change that we made. So when we first started out as a consultancy, we were we designed a platform that we were deploying for most of the customers, and it was all more or less the same. So the sum total of what a Scale Factory engineer would need to know about AWS, Puppet, and other components was constrained by that design, and we recognised that most teams were starting to want to build things themselves and didn't want to be constrained by our opinions about what their infrastructure ought to look like, and so we sort of saw that happening and decided to change the organization such that we were less kind of engineers in this particular part of AWS and more broad, general consultants across AWS as an entire platform. And for me, that seemed like an easy thing to do because we were already using a lot of it. We were just saying, well, okay, we will also support this version of the database and this CI tool and so forth. But that caused a great deal of unrest. And I think some of it is down to the connection that people make between their ego and their knowledge, and by sort of saying you now need to be experts in these other things, you're kind of unseating, making unstable something about an identity that they have, which is I'm an expert at X and Y. You're now saying you need to know all this stuff. They're like, well, I don't know all that stuff, so I guess I'm not an expert anymore. How do I talk to customers and sort of help them with problems if I've never seen them before? And I think there's an amount of uncertainty and fear in any sort of customer dynamic where there's a sort of perceived power situation where you're there as a consultant, so therefore you should have the answers. And it's been a bit of a journey to try and, I guess, bring people along to the point where they understand that the context that they have as someone who's used AWS for the last five years or something is as valuable as actually knowing the answer to the specific question. Sometimes being able to ask other questions is as valuable as knowing the answer. And the sort of the changes that we had to go through in order to become consultants rather than engineers, I guess, was uncomfortable for some, and I think some people still struggle with it a little.
Absolutely. I mean, do you think that some of the job interview processes that folks come through in looking for a role might reinforce that specific knowledge sort of viewpoint as opposed to the, hey, you actually have a ton of generalist knowledge, which is really great. That's equally as valuable.
Sure. I mean, not my hiring process, because that would be punitive and ridiculous. I mean, I think that it's definitely the case that there are hiring processes that seek to ask you esoteric questions and throw you out if you don't have the answers to those esoteric questions. And I think those are not good hiring processes. I think those sorts of questions have a place, I guess, if someone has declared themselves to be a deep expert in X and Y and they can't answer sort of fairly basic questions about the thing that they think of themselves as an expert at. But yes, I think that in the tech world, we value knowing things, right? We've sort of gone on this journey of filling our heads with stuff, and the stuff that's in our heads is what we believe to be our worth, and that's kind of wrong as an approach. I think our hiring strategy is much more about, are you a personable individual? Because you're going to be consulting with strangers essentially. There's a technical assessment which is all about kind of assessing your thought process rather than looking for specific answers, and then a sort of communication piece involving whiteboards and so forth, which is a part of the job as well, right? We're just testing for things that you need in the job, and we're not at any point expecting you to have answers to weird esoteric AWS questions. That's what your Solutions Architect Pro exam's for.
Awesome. So definitely one of the things that I found that causes the most disruptions in teams is folks leaving and personnel changes. And I think that often dramatically can shift the dynamic of a team. And I think certainly during COVID, when there's less visibility in the office and there's less visibility of where folks are potentially operating at, I think that can cause potentially ambiguity that might actually also cause anxiety in this sort of climate. So it's also one maybe to watch out for. John, you mentioned talking to a therapist, and I know you're very comfortable talking about your mental health and normalizing that. And I want to talk to both you and Claire on this one. So, John, if you go first and Claire, you follow. I want to ask you, what, if anything, has affected your mental health recently, and how did you handle that, and how open with your team were you on what was going on with your life?
Sure. I mean, I guess recently, the COVID situation has obviously sort of unsettled everybody. I guess I'm certainly recently experiencing a lot more just generalized anxiety about stuff. I'm usually pretty resilient. I can usually sort of take difficult customer conversations or other sort of awkward situations in stride. And I found recently I've had fewer reserves for that. So I'm a bit less sort of capable of going head to head with a difficult customer over something, and then also getting on with the rest of my day. I'll sort of, I need to go for a walk, I need to step out, or I need to just go lie down for a bit, or use a meditation app to get my head together, or whatever. Actually, if I'm honest, I probably haven't been as open with the team about that in recent weeks as I might have done historically. I guess when I'm in the middle of it, I feel less inclined, or less. It just doesn't come to mind necessarily to be open about it. But what we do have, so one of the things that I picked up actually from the CTO Craft coaching session that I did with Jeff, if Jeff's watching, thanks Jeff, was the sort of pre-meeting check-in, are you mad, sad, glad, or afraid check-in, which we instigate at the beginning of any sort of session where there's more than a couple of people present, and that's where I share that sort of thing. I'll be like, I'm feeling sad because I've had a difficult interaction with a customer, and whatever that looks like. So there's always a little bit of a sort of ambient publishing of that information, even if I don't expressly say, "Hey guys, I need to step away because I've got this thing going on." But I will do that from time to time.
Claire, can I ask you the same thing?
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, I mean, I've had some difficult experiences over the last few months, and I have been quite transparent and honest with the team about them, for a number of reasons. One, timing. I can remember me going for a bit of a blip myself during Mental Health Awareness Week, and I thought, be moral the way, share that's normal to talk about. And the other bit was just seeing that other people are experiencing the same thing. I felt that I should share and let people know that we're all human beings, and we all have the same sort of feelings. The weight of some of the decisions that I've had to make around furloughs and redundancies it'll haunt me forever. It's been a really, really hard experience to do. And I made a conscious effort to reduce the amount of people that had to make those decisions. And I made a lot of them myself for other managers as well, so they wouldn't have to deal with the decision making or deal with the conversations either. So I put myself under an awful lot of pressure, an awful lot of stress in the earlier part of the summer in order to do that. And I think I left myself at the brink of burnout at the back end of the summer, which was visible to people. Even if I didn't want to talk about it, folks could see that I was struggling a little bit. I made the decision to talk about it. I can remember one of the ladies in my team, who's part of the wellbeing group, saying to me, that are reminding me of the impact of if a senior leader shares their experience and talks about the troubles that they're facing, how big an impact that has. You're immediately normalising the conversation and making people feel like it's just a natural human thing to do. And I can remember I was at a show and tell when we were doing them every 2 weeks, and I demoed my experience of how I dealt with a difficult period over the previous 2 weeks, and I talked about how I'd bought myself a sad lamp, how I'd made introduced a new exercise regime, making sure I got out and got some fresh air more often, how I was doing journaling, and how I was using a meditation app, and I got myself something called a Shakti mat, which is it's like a plastic bed of nails, which sounds like torture, but it's actually quite soothing. But yeah, sort of just shared some of the things that I personally had been doing in order to help me deal with the situation. which people, I think people really appreciated. And like a day or two later, I sort of seen evidence of that working. And a member of my team in one of our Slack channels, so I've open forum, saying I'm feeling a bit shit today, need a bit of pick me up. Anyone got any help or advice? And before I'd even got back to my desk with a cup of tea, there was 15 different responses to our request for a bit of help and support. Of recommending different CBD oils and different Shakti mats and and all sorts of stuff, playlists, podcasts. That was a really for what was quite uncomfortable for me to do. I could see the impact of me doing it almost immediately.
So I had a really gnarly contract that was just deeply horrible recently. And that was something that really affected me. And interestingly, before I chose the current role that I'm in with JPMorgan, I was obviously interviewing with folks, and I was interviewing with a rather big consultancy. And it's something that I spoke about with them. And really interestingly, the peers in that interview also talked about some stuff that had affected them recently and during their careers at that place. And it was really quite nice to hear the folks sort of resonate. For me, it was more of a temperature check on where are these people, and are they people that were willing to share, and can they share with the team, can they share with an outsider, and that was a really interesting experience for me. And another thing that happened was, obviously, when you're not working, and no one loves their job more than I do, when I wasn't working, I felt this deep sense of emptiness, and it really genuinely got me down over a few weeks. And I think I spent a few days on the sofa just not moving and not really having that thing in my life. And it took my partner and a few video games to bring myself out of that funk. But it was something, again, that I talked about in my interviews with folks, and to say, I miss doing what I normally do. And, that's kind of why I'm looking for a role. And again, to normalize it. I think that's something that was actually on the feedback from my interview, that I was very open and showing the leadership principles that I guess you would look for in other leaders and peers that you would be hiring. Let's move on to maybe a difficult question. And I tried to think of something a little bit more interesting for this last one. But 2020 has been the epitome of contributing factors, as we say in postmortems rather than root causes. Beyond the obvious answer of COVID, what are some of the factors this year that may have caused folks to struggle silently? Sorry, can we go with Sarah for this question?
I think that's a really good one. I mean, I think COVID is probably the one that everybody's talking about, but I think it's also important to recognize that the things that happened before that might have been those hidden stresses are still going to be applicable today. So, I mean, there are things like, is there, things going on in their personal life? Are they suddenly having to think about childcare or caring after someone who's ill, all that kind of stuff. But I think there's also perhaps a heightened anxiety right now on am I doing my job well? Because there are a lot of talk of, furloughs, unemployment, all that kind of stuff. And if it goes back to my earlier sort of point on people generally are more engaged and feel happier if they have a sense of purpose. So it's sort of, if they have that sense of purpose and they understand how are they doing in terms of are they doing well, if you can try and sort of create that environment, I think it's really key. There was something else I wanted to say, but I've lost it for right now. So I'll let the others answer, and then I might put my hand up to say, I've thought of the other thing I wanted to add.
Claire, come on, give us an answer on that one.
Yeah, some other bits. I think sort of build upon what Sarah was saying there. Everyone has lives, and we're working from home now, and we're dealing with kids and pets and partners. I'm in the middle of texting my husband right now, who's just come in the living room and left the living room door wide open, and he still hasn't closed it. But that we just all have to contend with these things now, don't we? And what at the start was a bit of fun of, I'll make do with this makeshift desk or this makeshift chair. It's our reality now. I think every time I speak to different people, you can see that they've made their working environment that little bit more permanent. Just dealing with all of that is in a sustainable way is yet another change. To begin with, it was let's just figure out how we make it work, and now it's no. This is going to last. This is going to last for quite quite some time, and I've got to figure out how to do this in a sustainable way. Now, I think like the lack of human or a different type of social interaction compounds all of that. When you've got a little problem, you can't just bump into someone in the kitchen, or if you do, it's your son. They might not want to chat to you about work. So it just sort of compounds all some of your existing problems. Have been compounded by all the stuff that's happened with COVID, and what might have seemed like a little problem before can be made worse. Can feel worse.
John, can I rush you for an answer before we go to audience questions?
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you want to look at 2020 as a whole, I mean, COVID is the main thing, but we've also had the US election, which has caused a good deal of anxiety. We've got US people on the team, and also, whoever's in charge of the states affects us as well. Brexit is looming, so we're getting used to the idea of eating out of tins that we've stockpiled over the last 6 months, and everything else that goes on around there. I mean, there's economic worries. In my team, we've got someone whose mum is ill, not with COVID, but with other things, and there's a sort of travel up and down the country to deal with her thing going on. There's just a hell of a lot of shit happening in 2020, right? And we've still got scientists digging up stuff in the Arctic that they want to run tests on, and like volcanoes on the brink of eruption and so forth. So we've got another month of exciting 2020 things to happen, and it's just been a lot. It's been a hell of a lot.
Cool. Okay, so we're going to go to audience questions, and I think one of the most interesting ones that we've got is the question, I don't know who's asked this, but what indicates to you that a mental health issue is serious enough that as a manager, leader, you can't or shouldn't try solving this yourself? Claire, let's start with you.
Yeah, I've had to experience this, to be honest. It's when someone's talking about harm to themselves or harm to others, and that's an immediate sort of you need to get them to medical help as soon as you can. There's a fine line between an empathetic and caring manager and being a coach, and then being a therapist, which you have to be trained in order to provide therapy, and then actually providing genuine mental health first aid. So yeah, when someone starts talking about harming themselves, that's an immediate red line.
John, Sarah, have you got thoughts on this? Or
I think I think Claire put it really well. I think to sort of just build on that a little bit is that sometimes people might not be super open that that's the state that they're in. I think it's really tricky as managers. That's why I would generally encourage, especially if you've got something like mental health first aiders, to actually encourage people going to support services like that earlier rather than later. So we get to that point, because as managers, we can definitely sort of provide assets, or not assets, like options to help people through some mental health issues, but we're not experts and we shouldn't be. So I think sort of trying to direct people to find help in the right places earlier rather than later, and normalizing that is probably key.
You're not there to solve mental health problems, right? Is the bottom line. Like you as a manager can't solve someone's mental health problem for them, and you shouldn't be trying because you're not going to be good at it. So your sort of your position is to facilitate the changes to environments that are required to ease the pain and suffering. You're there to provide guidance towards the things that could help. But if you find yourself thinking, "Oh, I've got to solve this mental health problem," you're too invested in it, and you need to take yourself out of that.
Absolutely, great answers, folks. The next question comes as, how is mental health first aid working now people are remote? If one of you folks want to jump in with this one and call it open.
Personally, I'm treating it in the same way. So I think you have to be a little bit more diligent and maybe practice asking more open questions. But I'm still using the same practices and the same techniques. I think you just need to make sure that you're checking in on folks that little bit more often. Anyone else doing anything different?
Yeah, that's so. One of my colleagues has done the mental first aid course, but I haven't, and it's on my to-do list for next year. But yeah, I don't have anything to add there.
Maybe that's something you can share on social media so that any folks listening can pick that up and get involved. So I think we might have time for a quick fire round. Let me ask you, how do you sell handling of stress at the top to management, that it's not a weakness for a person to be in a situation that they're going through?
I own the business, so there's no one to sell it to.
That's the easy answer.
Yeah,
I think I guess it goes along with when you're trying to sell anything to the top management. It's about how you sort of pull together the narrative and sort of express what you're trying to achieve. I think if you're able to quantify it in terms of what impact it's having, and then sort of speak to what things do they care about, it makes it easier to sort of get manager buy-in for pretty much any topic. Same for stress. But there are some times where instead of trying to do a slower selling of something, I might just actually go, this is alarm bell situation. This is what action I'm taking. Sort of ask for permission. Don't ask for permission. Ask for forgiveness type approach.
Fantastic.
And I think for me, it's about walking the walk. If we are saying that our values are around keeping it human, and endorsing all these different programs, then you have to eat, live, and breathe it. I can remember when I was going through the experience that I explained earlier. Having a chat with the CEO who's my manager around. I'm pleased that we're talking about this, but I hope I'm not stignified for talking about the fact that I've got a problem, and I wasn't. But I was able to say that to him, and for us to have a chat around this. This is a good thing that we're talking about this, and I'm working through it. I'm happy that we're able to. So I think as senior leaders, we've got to walk the walk.
Fantastic. And on that note, sadly, this is the end of the session. So John, Claire and Sarah, thank you so much for being our panelists today. You can connect with our speakers after the session on social media, and we'll be sharing those shortly. Thank you so much all for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aubrey.
Thank you.